Going live in about 10 seconds.
Okay, fantastic. Okay.
We are now live.
Thank you. I would like to call tonight's Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee to order. Ms. Glorioso Mas, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Member Eric Abo.
Here.
Member Angela Bird-Gray. Here. Member Yolanda Eisenstein.
Here.
Member Judith Gabriel, she's excused. Member Tony Gerlix, he is excused. Member Dan Painter, he's excused. Member Steve Pilcher.
Here.
Member Ben Pengili.
Here.
Chair Michael Garcia.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Next up is approval of tonight's agenda. Is there any changes from staff?
I wish to request to remove item 4, which is approval of minutes. The July 14 minutes are not yet available. And remove items A, B, and C, which is reports from subcommittee chairs Dan Painter and Judith Gabriel. And I wish to correct item number 12. The next meeting is Thursday, September 12th. Thank you.
Okay, so just so I've got these down correctly, we are going to remove item 7.
Item 4.
Oh, yes, item 4. Remove items 8. Is it B and C?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And then date correction of September. What is the date?
I think 12.
It's 12th noted on the agenda. The agenda is noted September 12th.
Oh, that's the updated agenda because mine is, it says August 8th, 2024.
Okay, so somebody got it corrected for you. So
Okay.
we'll got those 2 corrections. Any other corrections?
No, Mr. Chair.
Any corrections from committee members? If not, what's the will of the committee?
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Glorioso Mas, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Member Abo,
Yes.
Member Board Gray, Member Eisenstein,
Yes.
Member Pilcher,
Yes.
Member Pengili, Chair Garcia,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you so much. So we've removed item 4. We'll move on to item 5, which is communications from the public. Do we have any members from the public that would like to speak tonight? And I know we've got Chair Gish online with us. Chair Gish, would you like to speak from matters from the public?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a very brief thank you to ITT for making this happen so that I could attend remotely. I really, really appreciate it. And it's an example of how when disabled people receive what we need to participate, that often everyone will now be allowed to attend remotely if they need to. And it's an example of the same thing that happens with curb cuts or sidewalks being accessible and things like that. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate being able to attend.
Great. Well, thank you, Chair Gish, and we're happy to have you here with us this evening. Any
Thank
other?
you.
Mr. Chair, there's an email from Steve Albert also.
Sure. Feel free to
Good.
read that if you'd like, Miss.
So dear committee members, I live by the Acequia Trail and ride it often. I live in the Siler Rufina district and view the trail as a great opportunity to connect the district with other areas of town. Please consider improving the trail and adding wayfinding signage immediately as it heads through Los Hermanos Rodriguez down Harrison Road and continues on Rufina Street from Harrison Road to Siler. There is already an existing bike trail simple striping on Rufina from Siler to Richards. These improvements can be made at little cost, but would be a huge benefit to residents and businesses in the neighborhood. Thanks for your service and consideration of my request. Sincerely, Steve Albert of 1190 Harrison Road. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gloria Samas. And if we could include the letter as part of today's packet, that would be great.
Yes, we will.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other communications from the public, let's go ahead and move on to item 6, which is communications from other agencies. First up, we've got Santa Fe MPO. Mr. Ani, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Eric Ani with the Santa Fe MPO. I'll keep this quick. A couple items. Number one, you've on your table, you've got the 2025 version, the most updated version of the bikeway maps. I want to be clear, in my role in that in the last year and a half has been, Leah, are you thinking about getting these bike maps done? And then the next month come along and I say, how are those bike maps coming? And then poof, one day we've got 6,000 bike maps to be distributed through the community. That's called leadership on my level. She essentially did it all. In my distribution of these maps today, I stopped at the Heritage Inspirations where they do electric bike rentals, and they are selling some of their electric bikes really cheap. So if anybody's interested in an electric bike, I said I would just pass that along, given I'm now, thanks to Mr. Abo, an electric bike enthusiast myself. I don't have anything else because I'll defer to the
Thank you, Mr. Ani. Really appreciate it. Any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Yes. Yeah. Okay, sure. And so those members that are online, Leah had mentioned she's got a lot more for those that might need it. Eric, do we have a location? I know we've got our pamphlet kind of center as you walk into City Hall. Do we have some of them there? Thumbs up. Perfect. Thank you so much. With that, let's go ahead and move on to the next item, which is B, Bike Santa Fe. Ms. Becky Smith or Mr. Dan Young?
Okay, good evening, I'm Becky. So for Bike Santa Fe, we had our board elections and we're pleased to announce that we have onboarded 3 new board members. They are Enoch Sincata, Sam Shanfarber, sorry, and Sarah Conlin. And also our longest standing board member, Stephen Newhall, is also staying on. We want to thank our departing board members, Dan Young and Shelley Maury Sloan, for all of their time and energy this past year. For 2024 to 2025, our officers are Jennifer Weber, who's the president, Aria Chiodo, the secretary, and Kai Filian, who is the treasurer. We're continuing to be busy with a lot of bike valet events. We valeted at the Canyon Road First Wednesday event yesterday and are valeting at the Portal Fest this Saturday, August 10th, Zozobra on August 30th, and the next Canyon Road First Wednesday event on September 4th. So we always need volunteers, so please reach out or let people know that they can email us at bikesantafe@gmail.com if they're interested in helping with that. We have received concerns from members about maintenance issues around the city. Main concern is the failure of the pedestrian and cyclist bridge at Clausen Street. This is a widely used route and we have heard nothing about the time frame for its repair or replacement. We were also alerted to hazardous plants jutting out into the multi-use trail from Zia Road all the way to Alta Vista, which creates a visibility issue, and that's really actually a safety issue. And then lastly, we look forward to hearing your ideas for the proposed general obligation bond measure and are interested in working with BPAC on infrastructure priorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments? Just want to say congratulations to all the newly elected members and please pass our thanks and gratitude for Mr. Young showing up to the previous meetings. So yeah, tell him he's always welcome, even though he's not reporting. The more the merrier. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to move on to item C, which is Safe Routes to School program, or Mr. Ryan Harris.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I've met most of you at this point, but just to let you know, my name is Ryan Harris. I am the Safe Routes to School coordinator for Santa Fe Public Schools as of April. And so today I just wanted to give you just a basic rundown of where we stand with Safe Routes to School as of right now and where we're heading in the next few months. To anyone unfamiliar with the Safe Routes to School grant, it's a federal highway grant, most recently renewed in the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's designed to fund programming and infrastructure to encourage students K through 12 to use active transportation to get to and from school. The current foundation of our program with Santa Fe Public Schools is the Walk and Roll to School program. This is a generally weekly program where teachers meet students in a central location, such as a park, within walking or riding distance from their schools. They then escort the student to school on a pre-planned safe route with preference given to motor vehicle-free infrastructure, which we have amazing infrastructure here for that. A majority of the groups meet and walk along multi-use trail, which is fantastic. Programs like this reduce traffic at the student drop-off, improve attendance, and students who walk or ride to school perform better academically. They feel more ready to learn when they arrive at school. So there's a lot of benefits there. We currently have 9 schools operating a walk and roll to school program on a weekly basis, one that's monthly and one that's twice a year. We pay a per event stipend to the teachers. So we're always know any teachers who are looking to get paid to walk with some kids. We're always looking to start some new ones. The goal is to start 4 to 5 new walk and roll programs this by the end of this school year. So we're working with a few schools that look promising. It also agrees, the grant agreement also includes verbiage to identify infrastructure opportunities and advise the district on changes that can be made to improve connectivity. Our first success on this is obtaining approval to install a gate on the south side of Santa Fe High School that will allow students access from the Arroyo de los Chamisas Trail. As of right now, the only entrance into the high school is the same entrance that the cars are going into, and there's not a marked crosswalk there. So it's we actually had a kid hit there last year he recovered, but not ideal. So this is going to provide more bicycle and pedestrian friendly route to the school, but it's also going to encourage students to take advantage of the newly improved crossing where the trail meets Yucca, as opposed to crossing again at that school entrance where there are no marked crosswalks. And we're hoping this sets the precedent with other schools. There's been pushback in the past of adding other access to schools for security reasons, but we're adding a locking gate with proxy card readers. And hopefully this will set a precedent to allow more pedestrian and bike access in somewhere other than where the motor vehicles are. The other exciting news we have is we are purchasing a trailer in order to set up a bike rodeo program. Having worked with youth bike education for the last decade, a trend that we've observed is a huge increase in the percent of 3rd to 5th graders who don't know how to ride bikes. So what we're working on is setting up a program for K through 2nd grade, free bikes for kids, donated 30 14-inch balance bikes. And we'll be building those up and setting up a week-long curriculum that essentially a phys ed teacher can check out, put the kids through a week-long program just to introduce fundamental balance and handling skills to kids K through 2nd so that we can work our way up. And as we grow the program and gain access to more bikes, we'll expand that to include older elementary and eventually middle school students as well. So you'll start to see our branded trailer rolling around town, hopefully by the end of this semester. So that's where we stand right now.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Harris? Member Pilcher.
Quick question. Do you do any activities associated with Capitol High School?
So we just got clearance to work with high school students. The Safe Routes grant was originally K through 8, and they changed that with the most recent infrastructure bill, but that happened right after our grant agreement was written. So as of like 2 weeks ago, we're allowed to work with high school students. So as of right now, no, but I certainly hope to work with them soon. There's one of our more successful walking and rolling programs goes right past them to Nino Otero. So we're looking at ways to maybe partner with them in a mentorship role and have them walk with students perhaps, or something to that extent. But yeah, we're going to grow towards high school, but focus mainly on elementary at the moment.
Member Bordegar.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all of that. That's good stuff. And so the Santa Fe High access by bike or walking or wheelchair or stroller is located where exactly?
So it's, how to describe this? It's funny because if you look on the map, there's actually a spot where there's a sidewalk that leaves the Arroyo de los Chimeneas Trail and goes right to the fence, and then there's nothing at the fence. So it's on the south end on the road where it would lead into the parking lot. So it leads onto a sidewalk that would lead, so southeast of the main student parking.
So it's not the same place where that stub out sidewalk goes? I'm sorry, I went there,
But
you know,
yeah,
the
right,
area. I'm
it-
just still trying to picture.
It is right. at
Where
the end of
exactly?
that stub out.
So it's way down there.
Yeah,
It's not,
it's a little ways down.
Yeah.
It's about a quarter mile or so past Yucca. So, but it's a much more pleasant entrance. So hopefully we'll get the gate installed and then do some events before and after school to encourage kids, like show them where it is, show them how much nicer it is
Wait, wait.
to walk and ride. And ideally with a high school, we'll see a lot of riders.
you can access it off the rail trail? Is that what you're saying?
So, yeah, so it'd be the rail trail on one end. You'd have to go up to the top at Siringo and kind of do a little U-turn and come down that steep hill. And then after the second bridge, it would let you in right there.
Okay. And it's only accessible by a car, a key card?
So it will be unlocked during pickup and drop off times. So
Oh, okay, it'd
beginning
be
of
left.
school, it'll be
unlocked.
on automatic, on a timer. So for the times when students are arriving or leaving at the end of the day, it'll unlock automatically during those times.
Great.
They'll lock again during school day and outside of that to keep people from wandering on.
Yeah, no, good work. I'm glad to hear that. Santa Fe High you only can drive in
Right, yeah,
and it's locked up and
yeah. It's
yeah.
a little-
And so maybe signage and wait, like make it, yeah,
Yeah, we'll look at
obvious
it.
it's there and let's be happy about walking in, you know, not on a road or biking. Anyway, thanks. I'm really happy to hear about those things. Those are huge, huge improvements.
Thanks. Excited to.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Good evening. Last on the update list is Public Safety Committee, Member Pilcher.
I've yet to be officially appointed to the committee, so I have nothing to report.
Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, thank you. That was a quick report. Let's go to move on to item 7A in the agenda, which is request to recommend to the Planning Commission and governing body to adopt the traffic impact analysis guidelines by reference in chapter 13 of the Land Development Code. And we've got Mr. Ani from the MPO here on this item. Floor is yours, Eric.
We're getting audio here.
Is it turned on? Is it green?
Yes. Hello?
There we go.
Sorry about that. We here now? Yeah, what I reiterate, I cannot say enough about the good work that our traffic engineers with the city, Gene Wolfenberger and Mike Demlin are doing in regards to pedestrian safety, in regards to bicycle safety, and working towards better roadway network. About 2 years ago, Leah, Hannah, and I, we serve on the city's development review team, right? And so the MPO has a tradition of doing this for many years. Leah takes the lead on that. And then we review pretty much everything that comes our way with a critical eye. Several projects came through our purview, and I was kind of stumped as to why the developments were requiring and basically in my opinion, overbuilding streets. It was like These were perfectly good streets that served multiple residents, commercial, what have you. And what we were effectively doing, enabling, was widening streets for turn lanes, decel lanes at I believe, an egregious length. You can just drive around Santa Fe and ask the question, why are these streets so wide? And then why are these turning lanes so robust? After looking into it and digging deeper, it turns out that the traffic impact analysis that the city has been using for years and decades have been a derivative of not having our own standards. And I say our own, the city's own standards. So the city has defaulted to the State Access Management Manual, right? So what's the State Access Management Manual? This was news to me about 2 years ago, and then I dug deep into it and got really, that was the first mistake I made, is asking the question, what is the SAM, as we call it, SAMM? State Access Management Manual is a tool designed by the New Mexico Department of Transportation to accommodate standards and assumptions, all the details for their roads, their highways. The basic assumptions in the SAM are based on highway standards, not local road standards. So when I read the language of the both the law and then the standards, it became evident to me that as a result of using these standards, we are effectively overdeveloping our roadway specifically for vehicles and not for people. So upon sort of questioning why we do that, there was, of course, resistance. This is the way we've been doing it. It was told it was the law. We can't do much else, or we don't have anything in place. And that's where we made the request and a real hard pitch to Land Use, then Director Kluk, and then Public Works, Regina, to actually promulgate our own, which is what you're looking at today, about 2 years later. We then contracted, thankfully, Land Use said we'll throw about $16,000. MPO, we added another 4,000 or 5,000 to make where we're at today. Over the course of the last year, we've been working with 2 consultant engineers, 1 transportation planner, MPO staff over here in this corner, and then Gene Wolfenberger as a really cool dynamic team. We really dove into a lot of the key questions of what are the traffic impact analyses? What are the values that the city of Santa Fe adheres to today that can be then pulled into what is now transportation impact analysis, not just traffic, which is a remarkable thing, I think, for Santa Fe. We're a little behind the curve in terms of other more progressive cities, but that's okay. The transportation impact analysis that you are looking at today, that the Planning Commission will hopefully make a recommendation to our governing body to adopt by reference into Chapter 14, changes some fundamentals. The fundamental change is that we will be asking developers, engineers, and technical teams, the city will be, let me be clear, to look at more than just the impacts. It asks, what are the impacts to pedestrians, to transit users if they're in the realm of the development impact, and then bicyclists. We went even a step further with the assistance of the leadership of our consultant team to look at pedestrian and bicycle. What's the word I'm looking for? Infrastructure. Help me out. No, this is like a game show. And Leah wins for level of stress. I'm so sorry. This is what I get for not having notes right in front of me. Level of stress is not something that we just made up. It's not very ubiquitous in terms of being used. In fact, we stole some language from Nashville, of all places, who were using level of stress as a functional way of addressing pedestrian and bicycle facilities at the end of the day. So this is a pretty novel approach, which we're very proud that going forward, that these regulations and standards might do much more for our street network. That's essentially the background. The difficulty has been that what we are asking the city to do is really rethink in a paradigm of moving away from, and I mentioned this in that last meeting, moving away from just the focus of the vehicle and the importance of how vehicles move safely, and then having the developer create infrastructure improvements, quote unquote, for primarily the vehicle, and shifting that paradigm to all users. It's going to take some time. There will probably be a grace period over the next couple of years where trial and error, we will learn from it. And I think it will be a better document over time. Thankfully, from the leadership from the land use, this is being adopted by reference. That means that we can, the city and the MPO can work to modify the document, and then we don't have to go back through the entire process unless there's something really substantive of change. So that is heartening to know that we're not going to be locked in with this one document, that we have some opportunity to change over time. In essence, there are the basics. The document is just over 30 pages, really not much in terms of technical detail. It is the technical detail that lies outside in the standards that the engineers would then rely on. What this does is really point in the direction that the developers and the city engineers will rely on this guidance to use those standards that reflect the values, again, of the city when it comes to transportation. If there are any specific questions about what's in the document, I would be happy to address those. Again, having your support is really critical, I think, because it is a substantive change for the city. There may be people who, and have been, and even as of this morning, are working through really difficult issues with traffic impact analysis and the city. And I'd say enough about the challenges that we've gone through in the last 2 years to get where we're at. And hopefully we can get through this. Yeah. I stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roddy, for that update. Any questions? I'll go Member Pilcher, then Member Abo.
Thank you. Well, I had sent a question in when I made my comments several months ago, and I'm curious. I don't understand how the city's development review process functions, but it was a little bit unclear to me. Is this a negotiation between the developer and the city, or is the city ultimately maintain the authority to say, no, you shall do this? The traffic analysis shows that whatever, that's too close to a driveway cut or something. So we're not going to allow you to have that. Is there a legal, just give the city the legal legs to stand on and instances like that?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, what I've learned more, and I've been involved with TIAs for years, but what I've learned in the last 2 years is pretty substantive in terms of two pieces to your question. Number one, the standards are intended to give the developer certainty, the developer's engineers certainty, and the city some certainty into what is expected out of the analysis. At the same time, there is something called the engineer's discretion, right? So that every particular project across this nation and within the city has nuances that are unpredictable. That may be that there's a constrained right of way, or there's something that has not been predicted that causes for a little deviation from the standards because it doesn't fit in that box, right? So to your point, there is a negotiation period when it comes to items like that. And what we have come to learn is that we've pushed hard as the MPO to use engineers' discretion as to the ultimate outcome of these infrastructure requirements that tend to, and I'll give you a specific example, lead to 345-foot right lane decel lanes at 11 feet wide on a 45-mile-an-hour street, which is called Beckner, that makes absolutely no sense from a practical point of view. So we come in from a non-engineering negotiation. So we believe we can do better, that these are going above and beyond. We then work with our transportation engineers to assist us. So it's not just our opinion, but it then becomes a technical opinion. How can we do better? What is fascinating, what I've learned over and over again, is that the developer and engineers have some leniency. I'm like, okay, we can probably do this differently. What we've learned too, this has been a real difficult process, is that it's very difficult for engineers or technocrats, and this is not a criticism, is to maneuver beyond the certainty into the unknown. And you get into the risky because, well, it's not exactly what these standards call for. So we're going to lean towards not moving towards risk, because then liability could be shut. So the constant feedback is we can't do that because it will be cause for a liability. And then, so we kind of default to the standard of over and over again. And so this document is, and hopefully the leadership who's putting it in place understand that and are somewhat committed to that negotiation. So it's a real dynamic two levels of approach that hopefully that helped describe it. It's not an easy way to maneuver in any particular policy document when there's complexities on both sides. It is complex.
Okay. Guest Gish, Chair Gish, what we'll do is we'll go to the members first, and then I'll go ahead and go to you for any questions that you may have.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Member Pilcher, is that? Okay, Member Abo.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Chairman. Eric, I appreciate the flexibility that having these guidelines be referenced by the new Chapter 14. I understand that's the process. My question is, so that there is some certainty with the folks using this tool, is that reference going to be and as updated annually or biannually? Or I think if it is just referenced, but there is no control over the modification of the tool, then it might be a little bit less effective and offer a little less certainty. Do you understand my concern there?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I think the language that will be used is updated as needed or necessary, because there's not a commitment to update them annually or any particular schedule, but there will be some language to that point as needed. However, the attorneys, nuance that language. So yes.
Right. And just to follow up on that, let's say it's needed because of the interests of a developer. The thing I'm worried about is you say, hey, is if someone objects to the output of their analysis based on this guidance, and is able to exert pressure so that your the subsequent folks who are responsible for this get some pressure to make changes. My concern is really to have a more structured renewal process, because if this is approved, then the future is uncertain because it can be changed as needed, and so it really becomes less of a guideline document and more of a starting point of a guideline document. I hope you get my drift. I'm really just trying to suggest that the language that puts this in place also puts some friction in updating it so that it's not updated willy-nilly, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that makes sense. I don't know if I can provide you a specific remedy to that. getting to this stage was a heavy lift in itself. What I found remarkable when I first went down this rabbit hole was reviewing chapter 13 2 or 3 years ago I was like, there has to be some sort of reference. There has to be some sort of codification of PIAs. There was only one tiny vague reference in the EIN process, the early identification. Thank you, anyway, that the city has been relying on. It's been completely random. So there has been nothing codified or legally substantive, which I found to be interesting at the least. So we have now been, our product, our draft has been introduced to Clarion yesterday to assist with some of these nuanced language as it moves into the new chapter 14.
And I really appreciate the work. I'm not trying to put that down. I'm just a little bit concerned by having it as, by reference, but no real structure around how that can be modified might be challenging. So thank you.
Member Bordigari, and I'll go back this way.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Abo, for the question. I really am glad you asked that because I've worked to implement chapter 14, albeit the historic preservation ordinances. And I will have a question, just how you see this happening, and maybe you've answered it, but I know that we came up with it's more like policies, right? How in the case of historic streetscapes, heights and types of yard walls affects historic streetscapes. And a previous planner, which actually happened to be me 20 years ago, with board members, we worked on guidelines. So we had guidelines for heights of yard walls, right? And it works to the degree the planner can work with the applicant to do it. Problem is that they're not part of the code. And so when you say guidelines, constituents or applicants would ask, well, do I have to do that? Do I have to do that? And so it rested a lot on powers of explaining why and the benefit, but ultimately the Historic Districts Review Board is applying the code as a staff, and it gets into that area of, well, is this really required or not? And these are just things in implementation that I think about, and I appreciate, that's where I go to this. I'm so thankful and proud of what you've done here, and it's wonderful, and it'll work as long as city staff who's in the posts works together and the leadership is there, and that changes. And so yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot about this. I guess do you know what I'm getting at? And are these going to be adopted by the city council?
Mr. Chair, yeah. The answer.
Oh, okay.
And I'll be honest. My
Just a
recommendation.
quick point of clarification, proposed to be adopted. So yes, but it would be, yeah. I don't want to give the impression that we're at the finish line. So it's moving up the chain for a potential adoption.
And then sorry to interrupt, Eric, but so our team that's working on our land use code and general plan and all that sees it as being part of the code, and that's what you're working on right now.
Yes.
Well done. Thank you.
Questions on this side? I'll go back to members on this side. Yeah, Member Pilcher.
Quick follow-up to Member Abo's question. So my understanding is then basically the code adoption in 14 will include a reference, will adopt by reference these guidelines. Will that language then also include or as may be amended from time to time or something of that nature. So it's in code. The ability to amend. Sounds logical.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions or comments from members. We'll go ahead and let guest chair Gish. I saw your hand up earlier.
Yes, thank you. And I want to comment, I did read this. And I really appreciate the integrated analysis of transportation. I think that it's the first one that I've ever read and seen. And I think that it's really important to understanding the full picture of how people move around the city. But one question that I do have is in relation to ADA compliance, because there is only one mention of ADA compliance, which is in relation to, it's on page 5. And it really quickly, the quote reads, specifically assess and summarize bicycle and pedestrian connectivity to existing transit stops within 1/4 mile of the site. If gaps in multimodal connectivity exist to transit stops, that would serve the recommend off-site measures for providing these connections. In addition, some instances, addition or improvement of a transit stop may be an option, particularly if a proposed development is attractive for transit users, which should also include ADA compliance. And that is the only mention of ADA compliance throughout this entire document. And so I'm wondering what extent, I know that pedestrians are often by default, including wheelchair users, assistive device users, and things like that. But without it being explicit and without Title II ADA compliance being mentioned in other areas where I feel it could be, to be more explicit, especially in relation to crossing signals, and things like that. To what extent was ADA compliance looked at while this was being created?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, that's an excellent question. Let me give you an example of how it's done today. So having researched and read, like, for example, the State Access Management Manual and what those specific criteria, standards, and assumptions are listed in that document. So in absence of city standards today, there is no specific reference to ADA and what is done today. On the far side of those standards are the requirements, whether it's from AASHTO, whether it's from any particular element of required standards. So the short answer would be that these guidelines point toward an engineering firm, a team, using existing standards, federal and otherwise, that will then inform the ultimate outcome. What we didn't want to do, and what we've seen, for example, a very specific example, I looked at the state of Wisconsin has probably a 200-page TIA guidance. We also looked at other references that were much more substantive. We did not have the time nor the need to actually draft out every specific requirement, because it is incumbent that these guidelines point in the direction that the standards that shall be used shall be in compliance with ADA. So in our conversations over the last year with the consulting engineers, with Gene, and with ourselves, is that, are we covering our bases? And we believe that the way these are promulgated is yes, because the consulting engineer for the developer will then be required through this guidance to use the standards that have been really tested federally and otherwise to accommodate ADA. So it's not necessarily that every item you see in this document is specifically accounted for. On the far end, that the consulting engineers and then the city will utilize. So we are confident that as even in absence of very specific guidelines today, coming from the SAM, that this is not a problem to be concerned with. But I hope that helps.
Chair Gish, didn't know if you had any other comments or a response to. Mr.
Yeah,
Honors.
I think that, I mean, if I was giving a recommendation, because I see on page 23, you know, where you discuss, should also be compared to existing sidewalks, and sidewalk buffers should also be compared to sidewalk standards from the most recent version of the City of Santa Fe Municipal Charter and Code of Ordinances. I would, my recommendation would be ADA Title II compliance to make sure that it actually is done. Because there have been historically numerous instances where upgrades were made and it was not ADA compliant. And so, you know, if this is adopted, that would be my personal recommendation from looking at policy and building policy and systems to integrate disability inclusion and ADA compliance from the start and not as an afterthought. And so that's my comment. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Chair Gish. Any other comments or questions from members? If not, what's the will of the committee? Sure, Member Bordigary.
I move that our committee recommend adoption by city council.
So we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Hey, any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any hands up. Ms. Glorioso Mas, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Member Abo,
Yes.
Member Board Gray, Member Eisenstein,
Yes.
Member Pilcher,
Yes.
Member Pengili, Chair Garcia,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ronnie. I really appreciate all the time, energy, and effort that went into this. Okay, let's go to move on to item B, which is consideration of a resolution 2024, yet to be numbered, sponsored by Mayor Alan Weber, Councilor Carol Merrill Worth, and Councilor Michael Garcia. It's a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the City of Santa Fe voters during the November 5th, 2024 general election relating to the city issuance of a general obligation bond and the maximum principal amount of $25 million to be repaid from property taxes to construct, design, equip, and improve roads and streets within the city. So this was requested by Member Bordigary. So what I'm going to do is, Member Bordigary, if you don't mind me, just as a sponsor, giving a little context why this kind of came about, and then I'll hand it off to you and the committee can have some fun with it. So this came about because as anybody who's driven our roads can attest, many of our roads are in bad shape, to say the least. And this is just would provide a little help in regards to the hundreds of millions of dollars in road infrastructure that's needed. I know that through the proposal of one-time funding that's actually going through the City Council Committee review process now, there is a couple $1 million, I think $3 million for roads, and I can go over the list if folks would like, just kind of highlighting some of the proposed expenditures that would go towards some of the maintenance infrastructure, but as you'll see as I'm going through this list, that even doesn't make a dent. And so from my perspective, we need to take action now. And I'm not always somebody who will want to have these infrastructure upgrades come at the cost of the taxpayers in regards to the tax increase. But I think there needs to be some action taken. And I've tried through the budget adjustment resolution process to get more money for roads, but there's, as you can imagine, when there's resources available, there's a big battle for how those monies can be spent. So I think that is why this proposal is in front of us, to put it to the voters ultimately. Do the voters want to see a increase in taxes to help pay for some of the road infrastructure that's direly needed in our community? So that's kind of where we're at. And just to give the kind of pathway for it, it's going through the committee review process. It will, if it ultimately gets approved by the governing body, then it will go on the ballot, similar to like the excise tax 3% question that was proposed last year, and it will be on everybody's ballot that votes in November. And ultimately, the public will have the final say. They're not the governing body. So the public will say, yes, we're okay with this, or no, we're not. I definitely am not going to look at this as the end solution. This is just, in my humble opinion, a first step forward in us making sure that we're fixing the roads that will allow folks to safely commute, whether it's vehicle, bicycle, or even pedestrian transportation throughout our community. It's direly needed, and that's the unfortunate consequences, deferred maintenance that the city has undertaken. And so I'll leave it there, Member Bordigary. And so you requested this, so I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Chair Garcia. And that was really what I thought would be helpful for all of us to hear, and from you as one of the co-sponsors. So thank you. And I'm not against, more for. Probably why I wouldn't talk about it in here a little bit was just to make sure that we're talking about complete streets, and everything we do is following the great stuff that we have to follow. And I really appreciate that's one of the things I wanted to know. And the other is, I really appreciated the memo, and it was really well put together, and the list down to Buena Vista between Don Gaspar and Old Santa Fe Trail. And I just thought that was, I mean, I work there now, and it's like Mad Max. I have to go slow, so my little Honda Fit doesn't fall in a hole. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, since we're all about, I mean, streets are living spaces, actually. So if anybody, I know Tony Gerlitz and I both asked for this to be discussed tonight, and he's not here, but mainly I was coming from our committee's perspective of complete streets, multimodality, all of that. And so, thank you.
I'll just provide a quick comment feedback in regards to the proposed infrastructure upgrades. That there has been roads identified, as you mentioned. I would highly encourage, if any member of this body or any member of the public feels that there is a different road that should be a priority over a road identified, let us know, because now is where we can make those changes. But in addition to that, I forgot to note, there is a percentage that is being set aside for smaller arterial roads within neighborhoods and communities for those roads to be fixed as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, that the need is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and $25 million is just a drop in the bucket. But this will at least begin to allow for us to begin to invest. And my hope is that we can begin to seek external funding opportunities, whether it's federal. I know there was the major federal infrastructure package where there was a great amount of resources available. But as I mentioned, it's at least from my seat on the council, I'm going to continue to push that we invest in the infrastructure that is in shambles in parts of our city. So any other member? Pilcher?
Yeah, I noticed I guess the appendix refers to this as mill and fill project. So we're really just talking about resurfacing the streets. No,
Yes.
no expansion to create a wider shoulder or anything of that nature.
Not at this moment. Yes.
And all these projects might occur, or there's still a list of perhaps.
The list that's there are the identified projects that will be targeted.
I've worked in and lived in a community before which did this type of thing, though it was restricted to arterial streets, but where they basically asked the voters passed a bond issue just so they could finally raise some money to go out and fix streets. It's similar Winter City, a lot of frost upheaval problems and potholes that develop every winter. So I think it's a good idea and not necessarily a tremendous economic impact to the average homeowner. So I read correct, it's about $25 a year for a $500,000 property.
That's what it averages out to be, about $25 for every $500,000 in value for. Yeah, sure. Member Bordigary.
It's a follow-up question. Did it pass? Are you saying where it worked, what you all did?
Yeah, it worked. This is in Spokane, Washington. So again, kind of a similar climate, a little bit worse, cold winters, a lot more snow than we get down here, but still many of the same type of problems due to being a winter city.
It was a bond collection?
Yep.
Thanks. And one more question about, sorry if I ruined something over here. Can you hear me without it being, okay. The list that we're talking about where they've been identified, is that in direct consultation coordination with the folks who are responsible for our transportation network? In other words, does it jibe with plans, long-term capital plans? And you know what I'm asking? Actually, I can just ask.
Right. And so I can't speak to whom Director Wheeler spoke with in regards to the list development. The list is comprised of existing identified roads on our infrastructure needs list. And what was ultimately decided upon was to have infrastructure development in each district of the city. So that way it wasn't of this potential $25 million investment, there be an inequitable distribution. It's not an even split, so to speak, but we tried to develop the list in the most equitable manner possible. So I couldn't speak to if Director Wheeler's connected with Mr. Rani on it and any other stakeholders. Sure, Mr. Rani.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, excellent question. So as of recently, traffic engineer Gene Wolfenberger sent us a list and said, help me prioritize and help me understand how these changes may be, with striping, which is really important, may be improved. And to Member Pilcher's, I think your point, actually that we will be we will not be shy about making recommendations to restripe that actually create road diets. Cordova being a good one that's been on the list. Because our recommendations will be to say, it doesn't have to be restructured, and at the cost of restriping, we can actually redesign an entire roadway. And this goes with Agua Fria and many others. So we've already gone through a list. It's been really fantastic that we've been even asked. This has not been in the past where we've been invited to the table. So we are not being shy in terms of, let's do some really innovative work in terms of buffered bike lanes. I'm sorry, I can't say protected bike lanes. Buffered bike lanes and potential road diets, narrowing lanes, all of the good things, they will at least be listened to. So, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rani. Member Borgay, I don't know if you had any additional comments or questions. Member Bo, and then we'll go back to Member Pilcher.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Yeah, I actually was involved in my work for Santa Fe County in putting these sorts of GOB questions together to go on the ballot. And they are, the way the county did it was they kind of rolled them. And they had the opportunity with their good credit rating to refinance them and get better rates at subsequent years. So sometimes they would not really impact property taxes for folks. And what the finding was that the they were most successful when they went in a presidential election year because voting was heavier, and they were most successful for streets, open space, and public safety. And the less successful ones were for administrative complexes and things like that. But these are things that folks realize in their day-to-day, it'll improve their life. And so I really applaud you for going this route. It's one of those things that, if we want good stuff, we're going to have to pay a little bit for it. So I think this is really helpful. And I appreciate what Eric was saying in that if you grind out and you redo Pacheco Street, you don't necessarily need all those speed bumps, just maybe make the lanes a little skinnier and give it a little room on the edge. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Abo. Member Pilcher.
Just a question, as this gets rolled out, is there a way to communicate to the public, private streets versus public? The reason I bring that up, like just in the last month or so, part of Beckner, they did one of these projects on Beckner, which I believe is a private road the whole way through. I'm not sure. It doesn't declare itself a private road the whole way through. But anyways, that street wasn't really in that bad a shape. So my concern is the public may say, well, you went out and you fixed this street and it wasn't even that bad a shape. How come I have to spend money out of my pocket to fix my street, which is in really bad condition? And when the answer may be is, well, that's a private road. So we didn't have anything to do with that. I've always found amusing, mostly out in the county, where they'll suddenly have a sign up that says county maintenance end and the road turns to crap. So I think I want to. Sometimes the road's really nice and it says county maintenance, and you kind of wonder, gee, I don't know if I want to be advertising that.
And you raise a great point, Member Pilcher, in regards to private versus public roads. I can speak from my position as a counselor where there's been instances that constituents have reached out for some maintenance to their roads in their respective neighborhoods, and they are private roads. And in those situations, unfortunately, the city cannot maintain them unless they get dedicated. And so it's not part of this process to have some type of education campaign, private versus public, but I think it's definitely something that would be helpful, a helpful tool for us to at least have information when those instances come up, because it can go down the path of, if the residents of that private road would like the city or if the county to maintain it, there's a proper process to go about it where it could be dedicated, and there has been that process has been fulfilled. So I think you raise a good point in regards to this. The city can maybe have a little more information on that. So, but it's not part of this proposal. Yeah. Okay, but any other questions before I go to Chair Gish? Okay, Chair Gish, I'll go ahead and defer to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So in reading through this, I was very happy to see mentioning of ADA curb ramp improvements. But I was wondering, because I was looking at the list, and I'm not familiar with all of the areas. I am familiar with some. Some don't have sidewalks at all. And so I was wondering if there is awareness or a list somewhere of how many curb cuts will be added or improved. And if that is the only known upgrade for ADA compliance.
Great question, Chair Gish, and I do not have that number, but I can absolutely work to get that for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then my other question regarding the language of the bond itself to go to voters, because it does mention in the memorandum to add ADA curb ramps. I was wondering if that could be added to the language.
Sure. Yeah. Yes, it absolutely can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to the resolution.
Okay.
And so within the resolution, on page 2, it has the way that the question will be worded on an individual's voting ballot. And so it currently reads, shall the city of Santa Fe issue up to $25 million in general obligation bonds to repaid from property taxes to construct, design, equip, and improve roads and streets within the city. If you would like to work with me to include some language that implicitly implies ADA access, I'm happy to bring that forward in regards to an amendment. That's how we would go about changing the potential wording of the question. So
That would be fantastic. And yes, I'm available and willing to work with you on that. And then I think just because it is part of this, but I think that it's not explicit to the voters. So unless they read, the memorandum, they may not know. And I think that with the level of necessity to improve Title II ADA compliance in the city and to repair the city to be accessible, I think that that's really important. And I think that would also potentially get the support of the Mayor's Committee on Disability. Because I was not clear, like when I first heard about this bond, I was like thinking, well, what is it actually going to do? And so with the memorandum, I think that it makes it clear, but it's not in the resolution.
Gotcha.
And so I think it should be in the resolution explicitly. In fact, there's no mention of ADA at all in the resolution that I saw. So that should be added. And then my third question and last question is, will there be a GIS map when the final streets and roads are identified, along with the curb cuts that will be either repaired or added? If that could be made available, because I do think that it helps to understand for people who need something visually. Not everyone does, but I think for the people who do, I think that would be very helpful to understanding how their neighborhoods will be improved by this bond.
Another great question. And what I can request from Director Wheeler is to include a map in the packet of the proposed roads that have been identified. It would get a little more tricky when we get to the set aside resources, because those roads have yet to be identified. But I think it's a great point that a map can be provided to demonstrate where these particular roads that would be reconstructed lie within our city. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you
I
so
can
much.
absolutely request that.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And it would be very helpful for me to also better understand how this will impact the community and my pathways of travel and places that I typically go, and how it will impact accessibility if the areas are right now not accessible. I think that that's really important. So thank you. I appreciate being able to contribute.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And I went to Chair Gist, which is a guest, not a member of the committee, and I'm happy to open it up to any members of the public that are with us if they've got any comments on this resolution. Okay, I'm saying no comment from from the folks, which is perfectly fine. Sure, yeah. Member Bordigary.
Thank you. And I really appreciate having it at our meeting. Chair, it's really helpful. I don't know how to say it. It's like opening up a box of Pandora's or something by, I think, in a way, talking about we need to get the roads fixed, right? We've got this really dire problem, solve it with this. And then here comes bicycle pedestrian task force. It's like, well, let's make sure that, that they follow, they're better. And we apply current regulations and policies that we have in place to do that effort, which would look like maybe striping it somewhere else, or, saving money on doing less, and I even hesitate to say it because I know, we have ADA accessibility laws at all levels. And maybe it's a question, and you can educate me on this, Chair Gish, but is it not, are all those standards are already in there? And does that mean that any changes that are made would be following ADA standards? I haven't worked in this area of planning.
So I can answer some of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is how it's supposed to work. That is unfortunately not how it always works. And in a lot of places, including Santa Fe, whether it's lack of communication, leadership, just things happening and things don't get made compliant with ADA. Budgeting can happen. And historically in Santa Fe, that has been a problem, where things have been, sidewalks, curb cuts, were not made compliant, and had to be redone. A lot of times the issues are not resolved until there is a Department of Justice lawsuit. And so the way that the Mayor's Committee on Disability is trying to resolve these issues is to make it so that it is just part of whether it's a resolution or ordinance or whatever document it is, that it's explicitly expressed within the document so that there's no question, because it has been disregarded in the past. And it potentially can be disregarded again, depending on who is in leadership.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And it follows reason that that's the case. So maybe I just need to be reminded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Any other questions? Member Abo.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the list and a couple of things that I have a little concern over. The heading of the list says $31 million mill and fill recommendations. The list itself with the prices, I think this is a spreadsheet and so the dollar values are at the very last page, totaled $25 million. My understanding with general obligation bonds, if the voters were to approve those bonds in November, they might be sold the following March. The money might be available. So if they were approved this November of 24, the funds may be included in a FY 25 budget if the bonds are sold on time, because I think that's the general timing. And so I would hope that whenever, if this is the final list or if it's subject to some change as it goes through the process, that all of the estimates are super conservative so that you don't tell someone you're going to do Lujan from Cerrillos to Ottawa, and then you don't have enough money to do Lujan from Cerrillos to Ottawa. So I would this is just general, it's always great when you could do more streets that are on the list than fewer. So I'm sure you got that. The other thing I have a little bit of concern about is that I know that Ramella carries a very heavy load in terms of project management. And so I know a lot of your work is, Ramella, is getting the money. And so this kind of does that. But this will require, project managers to be able to do that. And, if you have on-call contracts or something like that with a number of contractors to be able to do these things. When you get a lot of money, there's great news and there's, oh, great, now we have a lot of money. Now, how do we get this out the door on the street? So just some of my observations. I'm a little concerned about the $31 million header and the total down below that's 2029. Maybe it didn't catch up.
I can answer to that. So, capital projects section, which I manage, these are pavement rehabilitation projects. These are not capital projects. So when you see mill and fill, it only repaves the road. So if there are no curb cuts, if there are no sidewalks, if there are no ADA ramp, those improvements are not included in pavement rehabilitation. So what is included in pavement rehabilitation is striping. So what I understand from our traffic engineer, Gene Wolfenberger, is that when we repave the road, then that's the time or that's the opportunity to restripe the road for bike lanes if we have the right of way. If for example, we like to have sidewalk, then it's a reconstruction project. That's a capital project, which we get funding to reconstruct a roadway, and reconstruction projects is much more expensive than pavement rehab. For example, we are reconstructing Henry Lynch. Henry Lynch is only 0.6 of a mile from Rufina to Agua Fria. And the construction cost estimate is already $7 million. But we repaved the road for $400,000. So this is the difference. And I think that $31 million is a typo. So we have a project administrator who manages all pavement rehabilitation projects. And we have 4 contractors that are on call, and their contracts is up to $10 million for each contractors. And the cost estimate was based on that on-call contract, which the price is valid until mid next year. So mid next year, they can request to renew their contract, and the prices for unit items, they can change it mid next year. But I think our project administrator considered that like a 10% contingency rate for all these projects. But that's what I would like to clarify. What is reconstruction project?
No,
And
I
what
had
is
no
the mill and-
confusion over that. I know it's a mill and overlay, and I understand that striping is a part of it. And so curb cuts are a little different than the reconstruction work you're doing on Henry Lynch.
Mhm,
Take an existing curb and grind that out and make an ADA accessible where it is not,
mhm.
appears to be included according to the memo, right? And so got it, understood, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? Sure. Yes, Chair Gish.
Yeah, in addition to that, I just wanted to say, like, to clarify, because that's what my understanding was as well, is that if there is no curb cut, that it will be created. And so I don't know if that was the original intention, but that's how I'm reading it as well. And so I think that that needs to be clarified. If I know that it's not required with just repaving, but it does seem to imply that inaccessible sidewalks will be made accessible. And so if that's not going to happen, or if that is, I think that that needs to be more clear.
And what I'll do, Chair Gish, is during, because it has passed two committees, I believe, so it'll be before the governing body next week. I'll pull the item just so we can make these clarifications. That way, not only yourself, but other members of the public that might have the same questions can have that clarified.
Clock on your ballot.
Yeah, we've got to have this to the county clerk by the end of this month.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Thank
sure.
you. I
Member-
appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely.
One other question following up on something Mr. Ani said earlier about restriping. Is there any consideration possibly given also the changing speed limits? So restripe the road, you might narrow the lane widths. Nope. Okay. Well, we're not asking the voters to talk. There's nothing about restriping in this that's going to the voters. So, but yeah, because there's some, obviously, like if you were to make a wider, safer bicycle lane on Airport Road, you'd have to take away some lane width from the travel lanes, which might then necessitate having a lower speed limit to 45 miles an hour. A little terrifying riding a bicycle down that shoulder of the road.
Okay, Member Verdigary.
To clarify my reaction and wasn't making light of it. It was, I think in the vein of what I was bringing up. Member Abo helped clarify what I was trying to understand, and the issue being like, how much can we, is lard on a derogatory term? I don't want to say lard on to this. Add, because I think it's an opportunity, right? It's this opportunity to do it and do it as cost effectively, of course. But while we're doing this, can we add curb cuts and can we change the speed limit? And so I was kind of like, that's what I'm concerned about, or I'm asking about, which I think is really good that we're talking about this, because then you can take this forward and make this thing work and have education about it and manage expectation, right? And yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Oh, this is good conversation. Any other comments? So ultimately, what's the will of the committee? Recommendation can be made, doesn't have to be made, but It was just a recommended discussion before the body, so. Sure, Member Pingley.
For the roadways that are considering for restriping and road diets, on line, I only see like where we're going to be repaving, but I don't see where we're going to be restriping or doing any of those more specific details. Is there anywhere that we can see that detail, or has that not been discussed yet?
I can ask if we can get the detail. I can say I have not been provided the detail, but I do not know the answer to that. So, sure, Member Abo.
My suggestion is trim the list, get the money, then figure it out. And Public Works will, I'm not sure what the prioritization process is going to be. I'm concerned if with a 10% contingency and your prices are only good until the money gets here and it's a 3-year clock, you might be over promising. And so I would just be concerned that you say, here's what we are, give yourself a little bit of room for inevitable inflation, and then open the process up. I'm not sure how much. I would imagine each of the districts would want to get some input on, here's what we're doing. Let's work with Public Works and prioritize, have the counselor in each district do that. And then that might be the opportunity to work with Gene and Mike and the Public Works folks to say, hey, this is an opportunity for us to make this street work better for you. How can we do that? So, the first step is get something approved, some language approved that can go to the ballots so that folks can vote up or down on it. That's just my recommendation. Thanks.
Sure. Mr. Arani.
Mr. Chair, Member Pingley, if this helps, it is the intent, specific intent, do the overlay, mill and overlay, and then replace the striping as is. There's been no specific agenda to change anything. Ideally, in a perfect world, we'd have this really wonderful plan set that says this particular road will be changed here. That doesn't exist. So just to be clear, when I said that Gene has and will consult with us, then it is up to the after the fact, right? After all of this is almost done, the traffic engineer will then use their discretion to say yes or no. And I said we'd be delighted or not shy about asking, really up to the traffic engineer to say, here's why we can do it and here's why we can't. There's no codified process or anything like this. I'm just, again, grateful that we are at the table and then can have this conversation for the potential, but as it rests in defense of sort of like what the Public Works has to deal with, all striping will be done exactly as it is. Hopefully done.
Thank you, Mr. Arani. Okay, any other comments or discussion from the body? Sure, Member Bordigari. Sure.
This was a discussion item, but because it's on the agenda, it can be an action item. Okay. And it's all in the record how much we discussed this. I would like to move that the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee recommend approval of the bond election question. That's the right phrase. And you have to help me out here if this is this appropriate? I'm basically saying I would like to, as the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, recommend approval to the governing body that the election, the bond election occur for this purpose.
Sure.
Okay.
Of this
that's-
resolution.
Of this, yes.
Okay.
Understanding it will continue to go through the process, but categorically, we support this.
We've got a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, or hearing none, Ms. Gloria Somas, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Chair, Member Abo,
Yes.
Member Burt Gray, Member Eisenstein,
Yes.
Member Pilcher,
Yes.
Member Pingili,
Yes.
Chair Garcia,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all for the feedback and the questions and the additional requests for clarifying information. It's helpful. So with that, let's go to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 8A. Policy Planning and Law Subcommittee Communication. Member Eisenstein.
Thank you, Chair Garcia. I will just put this on the committee's radar going forward. We have a legislative session coming up. And at the previous sessions, we looked at the city's priorities and had a discussion. And then once the session started, I think Cal did as well. We monitored bills just to see by keyword, we bicycle roads, whatever, just to see if there was anything that we wanted to follow, that, if as private citizens, we wanted to support any legislation. As an example, Senator Cedillo Lopez had an e-bike state bill, and it was very important that we had that when we did our e-bike. So as we go forward, I just wanted to put that on the committee's radar that, you might want to do that as well, just to keep an eye on, any sort of legislation that would be interesting or impactful to the committee.
Thank you, Member Eisenstein, for that reminder. And this year is a 60-day session. So that means anything is germane, so to speak. It's not under the call of the governor. So lots more and various types of legislation will be introduced. So with that, let's go and move on to the next item, matters from staff. Ms. Gloriosa Mas.
Briefly, so ITT will support us again with our meetings. So our meetings will be recorded again on YouTube. And number 2, the Department of Transportation is asking for input on their 2024 Equity Action Plan. It was too late to add it on to this agenda, so they're accepting public input until August 14. So I will forward it to everyone. And then we had a pre-bid conference for the construction of 2 projects, the Tierra Contenta extension from Buffalo Grass to South Meadows, and the construction of a roundabout at Agua Fria and Cottonwood. The bid of opening for Agua Fria Cottonwood will be on September 24, and the bid of opening for Tierra Contenta will be on September 6th. We're hoping to get the bids that are below or just below or at the funding that we receive from the federal government. That's all from me, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gloriosa Mas. Matters from the committee, emanating matters from the committee. Member Pilcher.
Has the committee ever considered adopting bylaws?
I don't, not while I've been chair. So.
And the reason I asked, it kind of came to mind with our filling vacancies and how that we seem we have a goal, obviously, of having 2 representatives from each council district. There's nothing actually in our resolution which states that. So I've always felt it's a good idea to have something down in writing. If you ever get questioned, well, why did you not pick me? And we say, well, that's because we want 2 people from each council district. Well, where does it say that? That we'd have some document to kind of fall back on.
Sure. And I think to that point, we can update the resolution. That is kind of the unofficial bylaws of it. I mean, because I think, yes, but yeah, great point.
I'm willing to draft something up based upon something I've had back in my past work life, which would, for the committee to take a look at. If you're interested. I'm seeing a few nods.
Yeah,
So they
send it along, send it to Ms. Gloriosa Mas and she can distribute. And those that are interested can have fun reading away, and those that aren't, they can file it for reading later. Any other comments from the committee? Memorable.
Chair, thanks. Yeah, I'm a designee of BPAC onto Santa Fe County's what is it called? Transportation Safety Subcommittee. A couple of meetings ago, they took the county representative off of that and said, no, we only want Transportation Advisory Committee members on that. So the last meeting that I showed up, they said, no, we'll let you speak, but you're not really on this subcommittee, which was confusing to me. But at that meeting, the Economic Development District is putting together an application for SS4A, Safe Streets for All funding, a grant application for they're called Northern Pueblo MPO, Regional Transmission Planning Organization, and so they are putting in an application for that to do really safety studies for the northern counties. A lot of the small municipalities, Angel Fire and Cimarron and things, really are concerned about their pedestrian safety. And so that is so that application is going forward, and they were soliciting letters of support. I don't think it's appropriate for the city to offer a letter of support because it's for areas of northern New Mexico that do not include the city. But I just wanted to report that out. I'm not really sure. I'll talk to Dan next time he's around because he is on the TAC, and I think he was interested in being on this subcommittee. And so maybe we can swap me out for him because he is a TAC member, so he could be back in the committee. I'm not really sure what they're doing or why they're doing it. It's a relatively new and not quite fully organized committee. So so just want to brief you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Abo. Really appreciate that. Any other comments from the committee? Sure. Member Bordegar.
I just wanted I had a question, as I stroll around our town, and I often cross the bridge, downtown between Alameda and State Land Office. It's the pedestrian bridge. Just curious of the status, and because it's closed and it's got a lot of construction stuff, but it's been like that for a while. I just want to, if that's a connector, it's a pedestrian bridge.
Yeah,
Across-
we
crosses the
can
river.
get back to, that one's been closed for a while. I've asked for staff to
Raised-
update me and yeah,
Gotta be fixed. I
I
mean,
completely agree with you.
on this committee.
Yeah, because I don't,
Thank you.
it's,
What's going
we
on?
can chat offline, Romel, about it since it seems like you're unaware of it, but
It happened with Brothers Way Bridge as well. It's closed for a long time.
right,
It's a
right.
corridor. It's a.
Well, and it's some of the concern I've got around the bridge that just recently closed last week. And so, yeah, the Clausen Street Bridge, they closed that one. And so I understand closing bridges because there is necessity for public safety, but we've got to have a plan to fix them and reopen them. So, yeah. Any other comments from the committee? Matters from the chair, just my hope is that the BPAC strategic plan will be presented to the governing body sometime this month, whether it be during next week's governing body meeting or the last meeting in August. I'll make sure to have through Romella, keep the committee apprised of the matter. That way, if members want to attend the meeting, happy to do so. As well, there are some reappointments and new appointments that have been submitted for approval of the governing body, including Mr. Gary Schiffmiller, as well as another individual. We're figuring out the logistics of a potential vacancy of maybe Member Eisenstein. So stay tuned on that one. With that, no other comments for me. Just thank you, everybody, for all that you do. Our next meeting is Thursday, September 12th. With that, we are adjourned.